Dr. Lisa Morgan had spent her entire life looking at the stars. She had always believed that somewhere out there, other beings existed. But she never imagined that when they finally came, they would come to destroy everything she loved on. It was a cold night in the Atacama Desert of Chile. Lisa sat alone in the observatory, her eyes fixed on the computer screen. The readings made no sense. Massive energy signatures were moving toward Earth at impossible speeds. She checked the equipment 3 times. It was not broken. Something was coming. She picked up the phone and called her contact at the Global Space Agency. Her voice was shaking when she spoke. Within hours, the news spread to every government on the planet. Within 3 days, the entire world knew the truth. The aliens had arrived. Commander Daniel Carter stood on the roof of the Pentagon and watched the sky. He was 42 years old, a decorated Air Force veteran with gray hair at his temples and tired lines around his eyes. He had fought in 3 wars, but nothing had prepared him for this. The alien ships were enormous. Each one was the size of a small city, and there were hundreds of them. They blocked out the sun over Washington, New York, London, Tokyo, and every major city on Earth. The world had never seen darkness like this. The broadcast came on every channel, in every language. The alien voice was cold and mechanical. People of Earth, we are the Varax Dominion. Your planet contains resources we require. You will surrender all materials and submit to harvesting. Resistance will result in complete annihilation. You have 72 hours to comply. Panic spread across the globe. People ran through the streets, crying and screaming. Governments fell into chaos. Some leaders wanted to surrender immediately. Others wanted to fight. Nobody knew what to do. General Patricia Wells called an emergency meeting of military leaders from every nation. She was a stern woman in her 60s, with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too much death. She stood at the head of the table and looked at the faces around her. "We need someone to lead our combined forces," she said. "Someone who can unite us." Every eye in the room turned to Daniel Carter. He did not want the job. He had seen enough war to last 10 lifetimes. But when he looked at the faces of the men and women in that room, he saw the same fear he felt in his own heart. They needed hope. They needed someone to stand up and say that humanity would not give up without a fight. "I will do it," Carter said quietly. The first Varax ground forces landed 48 hours later. They came down in massive dropships that burned holes in the clouds. The creatures that emerged were terrifying. They stood 8 feet tall with gray skin, 4 arms, and black eyes that showed no emotion. They wore armor that seemed to absorb every bullet fired at it. Sergeant Kevin Park was 26 years old when he saw his first Varax soldier. He was stationed at a military base in Colorado when the aliens attacked. He watched as his friends fired everything they had at the creatures. Rifles, grenades, even rockets. Nothing worked. The Varax weapons were worse. They fired beams of blue light that turned soldiers to ash in seconds. Kevin ran. He was not proud of it, but he ran because staying meant death. He was one of the few survivors of that first battle. Cities fell one after another. New York was gone in 6 hours. London lasted 8. Tokyo held for almost a full day before the Varax overwhelmed the defenders. The death toll climbed into the millions, then tens of millions. Commander Carter watched the footage from a bunker deep underground. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady when he spoke to his officers. "We can't beat them with conventional weapons," he said. "We need to find another way." Dr. Lisa Morgan was brought to the bunker 3 days after the invasion began. She had been studying the Varax signals, trying to understand their technology. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and coffee stains on her lab coat. "They are more advanced than us by at least 1,000 years, she told Carter. "Their ships, their weapons, their armor. Everything they have is beyond anything we can match. Then how do we fight them? Carter asked. Lisa shook her head. I do not know yet, but every species has weaknesses. We just need to find theirs. Around the world, the resistance began to form. Survivors gathered in hidden locations, sharing information and resources. They were not soldiers. They were teachers, farmers, engineers, and students. But they refused to give up. In the Rocky Mountains, a group of civilians built a hidden shelter. In the forest of Germany, former soldiers trained anyone willing to fight. In the deserts of Australia, scientists worked day and night to find any weakness in Vorax technology. Humanity was beaten, but not broken. On the 10th day of the invasion, Commander Carter addressed what remained of the world's military forces. His face appeared on screens in bunkers and shelters across the planet. His voice was tired but strong. They want us to surrender, he said. They think we are weak. They think we will give up and let them take everything we have built, everything we love. They are wrong. He paused and looked directly into the camera. We have faced dark times before. We have fought wars against each other, survived plagues, and rebuilt from the ashes of destruction. We are still here. We are still fighting. And we will not stop until every last one of these invaders is driven from our world. Kevin Park watched the speech from a small shelter in the mountains. He thought about the friends he had lost. He thought about the fear he had felt when he ran. And he made a promise to himself. He would not run again. Across the planet, millions of people made the same promise. They did not know how they would win. They did not know if victory was even possible. But they knew one thing for certain. Humanity would not go quietly into the night. 3 weeks had passed since the invasion began. The world had changed in ways nobody could have imagined. Major cities lay in ruins. Governments had collapsed. Billions of people had either died or gone into hiding. But humanity was learning. Dr. Nathan Cole was a xenobiologist who would spend his career studying the possibility of alien life. Now he had an actual alien to study. A wounded Vorax soldier had been captured during a failed assault on a resistance camp in Montana. The creature was kept in a reinforced cell deep underground. Nathan spent days examining the alien. He took samples, ran tests, and documented everything. The Vorax were fascinating and terrifying. Their bodies were incredibly strong, able to survive conditions that would kill any human. But Nathan noticed something interesting. The Vorax had small metal implants in their skulls. These implants connected to their nervous systems and seemed to control many of their functions. Nathan ran more tests and discovered something that made his heart race. The implants were sensitive to certain electromagnetic frequencies. He called Commander Carter immediately. If we can generate the right frequency, Nathan explained excitedly, we can disrupt their neural implants. It would not kill them, but it would disable them temporarily, maybe long enough to take them down. Carter felt hope for the first time in weeks. How do we generate this frequency? I need engineers, Nathan said. Good ones. Meanwhile, Captain Amy Richardson was fighting her own battle in the skies over what used to be Texas. She was 34 years old, a fighter pilot with 15 years of experience. She had shot down more enemy aircraft than she could count. But she had never faced anything like the Vorax. Their ships were faster, more maneuverable, and had shields that absorbed every missile she fired. She had lost half her squadron in the first week. The remaining pilots were exhausted and scared, but Amy refused to give up. During a desperate dogfight over the ruins of Houston, Amy noticed something strange. When her missiles hit a Vorax ship shield, there was a brief moment when the shield seemed to flicker. It was less than a second, but she saw it. She radioed her wingman. Hit the same ship I just hit. Right now. Her wingman fired, The missile struck the Varak ship during the shield's recharge delay. The explosion tore through the alien vessel, sending it crashing to the ground. Amy let out a scream of victory. They had just shot down a Varak ship. She reported her discovery to command immediately. For the first time, humans knew how to hurt the enemy in the air. In a bunker beneath the ruins of Chicago, a young man named Marcus Webb was doing his own part for the resistance. Marcus was 28 years old, a former hacker who had spent years breaking into systems he was not supposed to access. Now he was using those skills for something more important than stealing credit card numbers. He had been working on cracking the Varak's communication network for weeks. Their encryption was incredibly advanced, but Marcus was patient and clever. He worked 20-hour days, surviving on coffee and determination. Finally, he broke through. What he found changed everything. The Varak's Dominion was not acting on behalf of any galactic government. They were rogue conquerors, operating outside the laws of a larger galactic community. The other species in the galaxy did not approve of what the Varaks were doing to Earth. Some were even considering intervention. Marcus brought this information to Commander Carter. "They are alone," Marcus said. "The rest of the galaxy thinks what they are doing is wrong. If we can hold out long enough, help might come." Carter nodded slowly. "Then we need to survive. And we need to fight back." He gathered his officers and shared all 3 discoveries: the electromagnetic weakness, the shield recharge delay, the Varak's isolation from the galactic community. "For the first time since this started, we have real intelligence on the enemy," Carter said. "We know how to hurt them. We know they have weaknesses. Now we need to use this information." The resistance began to spread the knowledge across the globe. Engineers worked on devices that could generate the right electromagnetic frequencies. Pilots trained to exploit the shield delay. Strategists planned coordinated attacks. Dr. Lisa Morgan worked with Nathan Cole to refine their understanding of the Varak's technology. She spent long nights studying captured equipment, looking for any other weaknesses they could exploit. One night, Carter found her asleep at her desk, papers scattered around her. He gently covered her with a blanket and looked at her notes. She had written a single sentence at the bottom of one page: "Every empire falls. We just need to find the cracks." Sergeant Kevin Park had changed since the first days of the invasion. He was no longer the frightened young man who had run from his first battle. He had fought in a dozen skirmishes since then, leading small teams of survivors against Varak's patrols. He had lost more friends. He had killed his first Varak soldier with a knife when his gun ran out of ammunition. He had become the kind of soldier that others looked to for guidance. When he heard about the electromagnetic discovery, he volunteered immediately for the first field test. The test was simple. A small team would engage a Varak's patrol while a technician activated the prototype device. If it worked, the Varaks would be disabled. If it did not work, everyone would probably die. The device worked. Kevin watched as 5 Varak soldiers suddenly dropped their weapons and collapsed, their bodies twitching as their neural implants failed. His team moved in and finished them before they could recover. He looked at the bodies of the aliens that had seemed so invincible just weeks ago. They were not gods. They were not unstoppable. They were just another enemy that could be beaten. He picked up his radio and sent a message to command. "Confirmed success. The device works. These things can be killed." Across the planet, the Resistance celebrated their first real victories. Small battles were won. Varak's patrols were ambushed and destroyed. For the first time, humans were not just surviving. They were fighting back. 2 months into the invasion, the tide was beginning to turn. Humanity was still losing, but they were no longer helpless. Every day brought new small victories. Every week, more Varak soldiers fell to human weapons. In a hidden factory beneath the Rocky Mountains, A woman named Elena Vasquez was changing the war. She was 40 years old, a civilian engineer who had spent her career designing mining equipment. Now she was designing weapons. The electromagnetic pulse devices were effective, but they were large and difficult to transport. Elena spent weeks working on a smaller version. She barely slept. She barely ate. She worked until her hands bled and her eyes burned. Finally, she succeeded. The EMP grenade was the size of a baseball. It could be carried by a single soldier and thrown like any other grenade. When it exploded, it released a pulse that disabled every Varax within 30 feet. Elena presented her invention to Commander Carter with tired but proud eyes. "One soldier can now take down an entire Varax squad," she said. "We can mass-produce these within weeks." Carter shook her hand firmly. "You may have just saved the human race." The Resistance established its main base in a massive cave system deep in the Rocky Mountains. They called it Haven. Thousands of survivors lived there, including soldiers, scientists, engineers, and families. It was the last great stronghold of organized human resistance. Lieutenant Chris Palmer served as Carter's communications officer. He was a quiet man in his 30s who had lost his entire family in the first week of the invasion. He never talked about it. He just worked, coordinating messages between resistance cells across the globe. One day, he approached Carter with a worried expression. "Commander, I have been tracking Varax patrol patterns. They are searching for something. I think they know about Haven." Carter felt a chill run down his spine. "How long do we have?" "Weeks, maybe. A month if we are lucky." They needed to act fast. Carter designed a plan called Operation Blackout. It was the most ambitious attack the Resistance had ever attempted. Teams across the globe would simultaneously assault Varax communication relays. If successful, it would cut off Varax ground forces from their command ships in orbit. The operation required perfect coordination. Every team had to strike at exactly the same moment. One mistake could alert the Varax and doom them all. Song Yi Kim was a Korean-American, Meg, who worked in Haven's medical center. She was 29 years old with gentle hands and a calm voice that comforted the wounded. She had saved hundreds of lives since the invasion began. When she heard about Operation Blackout, she volunteered immediately. "You are a medic," Carter said. "You do not have to fight." Song-Yi looked at him steadily. "Every team needs someone who can keep them alive." "I am going." On the night of Operation Blackout, Resistance teams across the world waited in position. Kevin Park led a squad in what used to be Nevada. Amy Richardson commanded an air support team ready to provide cover. Song-Yi Kim checked her medical supplies one last time. At exactly midnight, Greenwich Mean Time, Carter gave the order. "All teams, execute." The attacks happened simultaneously across 6 continents. Resistance fighters stormed Varax communication facilities with EMP grenades and captured alien weapons. The fighting was brutal and costly. Many good soldiers died in those first minutes, but the relays fell. One by one, the Varax communication towers went dark. Within 2 hours, ground forces across the planet lost contact with their command ships. For the first time since the invasion, the aliens were blind and confused. The Resistance did not waste the opportunity. In the 48 hours that followed, human forces liberated 3 major population centers. Millions of people who had been living under Varax occupation were freed. The victories were broadcast across secret radio networks, giving hope to survivors everywhere. Kevin Park led the assault on a detention facility in the desert. They freed over 2,000 prisoners, including children who had not seen sunlight in weeks. When the last Varax guard fell, Kevin felt tears running down his face. This was why they fought, but the Varax were not defeated. High above Earth, in the massive flagship that served as the invasion's command center, Overlord Thrax learned of the attacks. He was enormous, even by Varak standards, standing over 10 feet tall with skin like dark stone. He had conquered 12 worlds before Earth. He had never lost. His rage shook the walls of the command center. "These primitive creatures dare to strike at us," he growled. "They will pay for this insult." He ordered his engineers to repair the communication network. He ordered his generals to increase patrols tenfold. And he ordered the preparation of the Annihilator. The Annihilator was the Varax's ultimate weapon. It was a device capable of destroying a planet's entire atmosphere in minutes. Thrax had hoped he would not need to use it. Earth's resources were valuable, and destroying the atmosphere would make harvesting more difficult. But these humans had proven too troublesome. Better to destroy them completely than risk further embarrassment. Dr. Lisa Morgan detected the energy signature 3 days after Operation Blackout. "Commander," she said, her voice shaking, "they are powering up something massive on the flagship. Based on the readings, it is some kind of atmospheric weapon." Carter stared at the data. "How long until it is ready?" "Based on the power buildup, approximately 72 hours. 3 days. They had 3 days to stop a weapon that could kill every living thing on Earth. Carter called an emergency meeting of all senior officers and scientists. The room was silent as he explained the situation. When he finished, nobody spoke for a long moment. Finally, Kevin Park stood up. "Then we take the fight to them," he said. "We hit the flagship and destroy that weapon." Carter looked at the young sergeant. "That would be a suicide mission." Kevin met his eyes without flinching. "Maybe, but it is better than waiting here to die." Around the room, heads began to nod. They had come too far to give up now. Humanity would strike back one more time. The plan was desperate and dangerous. Commander Carter knew that most of the people in that room would not survive. But there was no other choice. Dr. Lisa Morgan had calculated the exact location of the Annihilator on the Varax flagship. It was in the center of the ship, protected by dozens of layers of armor and thousands of soldiers. Getting there would be nearly impossible. But nearly impossible was not the same as completely impossible. The plan had 3 parts. First, Captain Amy Richardson would lead a squadron of modified fighters against the flagship's defensive fleet. Their job was to draw attention and create chaos. Second, a ground team would board the flagship through its waste disposal system, which Marcus Webb had identified as a weak point in the ship's defenses. Third, the boarding team would fight their way to the Annihilator and destroy it. "The disposal system empties into space on a regular cycle," Marcus explained, pointing at diagrams on a screen. "If we time it right, we can enter the ship when the ports open. The Varax will not expect an attack from that direction." Carter nodded slowly. "Who leads the boarding team?" Kevin Park stepped forward without hesitation. "I will." Dr. Nathan Cole also volunteered. "You will need someone who understands Varax technology. I can help disable the weapon once we reach it." Song-Yi Kim picked up her medical bag. "And you will need someone to keep you alive long enough to get there." The team was assembled. 20 soldiers, plus Nathan and Song-Yi. They spent 2 days training and preparing. They studied the layout of the flagship. They practiced with captured Varax weapons. They said goodbye to loved ones. Marcus Webb spent those 2 days making final preparations. He gave the boarding team communication devices that could cut through Varax jamming signals. He provided detailed maps of the ship's interior. He did everything he could to give them a chance. On the night before the mission, Carter found Amy Richardson sitting alone on the roof of Haven, looking at the stars. "Scared?" he asked Dot. She smiled slightly. "Terrified. But I have been scared before. It does not stop me from doing what needs to be done." Carter sat beside her. "You know the odds." "I know." She turned to look at him. I also know that if we do nothing, everyone dies anyway. At least this way, we go down fighting." He nodded. There was nothing more to say. The attack began at dawn. Amy Richardson led 15 fighters into the sky. They were old aircraft, modified with shields stripped from captured Varax ships. They were not as fast or as powerful as the alien vessels, but they were flown by the best pilots humanity had left. The Varax fleet moved to intercept them immediately. Within minutes, the sky was filled with explosions and burning wreckage. 3 human pilots died in the first wave. Then 5 more. Amy pushed her aircraft to its limits, dodging and weaving through enemy fire. She had never flown like this before. Every second felt like it could be her last, but she kept the Varax's attention focused on her squadron. She kept them distracted. Far below, a transport ship carrying the boarding team approached the flagship's waste disposal port. Kevin Park sat in the cargo bay, checking his weapons for the 100th time. Around him, his team was silent, each person lost in their own thoughts. The port opened on schedule. The transport slipped inside. They were in. The interior of the Varax flagship was dark and humid, filled with strange smells and alien sounds. Kevin led his team through narrow corridors, following the route Marcus had mapped out. They moved quickly and quietly, avoiding patrols when possible and eliminating them silently when necessary. Song-Yi stayed in the middle of the formation, ready to treat any wounded. Nathan Cole examined every piece of Varax technology they passed, looking for any additional weaknesses they could exploit. They were halfway to the Annihilator when things went wrong. A Varax patrol appeared without warning, cutting off their escape route. The fight was short and brutal. 4 soldiers died before the aliens were killed. Song-Yi worked frantically to save a 5th, but there was too much damage. He died in her arms. Kevin forced himself to keep moving. There was no time for grief. In the skies above Earth, Amy Richardson's squadron was being destroyed. Only 4 pilots remained, and 2 of them were wounded. The Varax were closing in for the kill. Amy made a decision. "All pilots break off and return to base," she ordered. "I will cover your retreat." "Captain, you cannot survive alone," her wingman protested. "I know." She took a deep breath. "Tell Carter it was an honor." She turned her aircraft toward the flagship's main hangar and accelerated to maximum speed. The Varax ships chased her, firing constantly. Her shields failed. Her engines caught fire, but she did not stop. Her aircraft struck the hangar's shield generator at full speed. The explosion was massive, tearing a hole in the flagship's defenses. The remaining human pilots escaped through the chaos she created. Amy Richardson died a hero. Inside the flagship, Kevin's team felt the explosion. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Varax soldiers rushed toward the damaged hangar, leaving the path to the Annihilator less defended. "Move," Kevin ordered. "She bought us time. We cannot waste it." They fought through 3 more checkpoints, losing soldiers at each one. By the time they reached the Annihilator chamber, only Kevin, Nathan, Song-Yi, and 2 other soldiers remained. The chamber was enormous, dominated by a massive device that pulsed with deadly energy. Nathan immediately began examining the controls. "I can disable the targeting system," he said, "but the core is protected by an energy field. Someone will need to shut it down manually from inside the field. What happens to whoever goes inside?" Kevin asked. Nathan hesitated. "The radiation will kill them within seconds." Before anyone could respond, Varax soldiers burst into the chamber. The battle was intense and terrible. Both remaining soldiers fell. Song-Yi was badly wounded. Nathan was shot in the chest while working on the targeting system. He looked at Kevin with fading eyes. "The targeting system is down," he gasped. "But the core is still active. Someone has to." He died before he could finish. Kevin looked at the Annihilator. then at Song Yi. She was unconscious, bleeding heavily. He could not move her and destroy the weapon at the same time. The countdown timer showed 5 minutes until activation. Kevin made his choice. He would sacrifice himself to save Earth. Then a voice spoke from behind him. "Not you, soldier." Kevin turned to see Marcus Webb standing in the doorway, a determined look on his face. "You stowed away," Kevin said in disbelief. Marcus smiled grimly. "I told you I could cut through Vorax jamming. I did not mention I could also cut through transport security." The countdown showed 4 minutes. "Go," Marcus said. "Get her out of here. The world needs soldiers like you more than hackers like me." Kevin wanted to argue, but there was no time. He grabbed Song Yi and ran. Marcus Webb stood alone in the Annihilator chamber. The massive weapon hummed with deadly energy, its countdown timer showing less than 4 minutes until activation. In 4 minutes, every living thing on Earth would die. He was afraid. He had never been brave. He had spent his life behind computer screens, hiding from the real world. But right now, in this moment, he understood what courage really meant. It was not about being unafraid. It was about doing what needed to be done despite the fear. He walked toward the energy field surrounding the Annihilator's core. The radiation hit him immediately. His skin began to burn. His vision blurred. Every step felt like walking through fire. But he kept moving. Outside the flagship, Commander Carter watched from Haven's command center. The communication link was weak, but he could hear Marcus's voice through the static. "Commander, I am at the core. Beginning manual shutdown now." Carter gripped the edge of the table. "Marcus, Tell my mother I was not a waste of space after all." Marcus laughed weakly. "Tell her I did something that mattered." Carter felt tears running down his face. "You are a hero, son. The whole world will know your name." Marcus reached the core's control panel. His hands were shaking badly, the radiation destroying his body from the inside. He had maybe 30 seconds of consciousness left. He entered the shutdown code he had memorized. The first lock disengaged. Then the second. Then the third. The countdown timer stopped at 11 seconds. Marcus Webb collapsed beside the deactivated weapon, a small smile on his burned face. He had done it. He had saved the world. The explosion that followed was not from the Annihilator. It came from the core's energy feedback, triggered by the emergency shutdown. The blast tore through the center of the flagship, destroying everything in its path, including Overlord Thrax, the Vorax Supreme. Commander had been on his way to the Annihilator chamber when the explosion hit. He had wanted to personally witness Earth's destruction. Instead, he witnessed only a brief moment of fire before he ceased to exist. Without Thrax, the Vorax fleet fell into chaos. The alien soldiers had depended on his command for every major decision. They had no plan for what to do if he died. Different officers gave conflicting orders. Ships collided with each other trying to flee. Kevin Park carried Song Yi through the disintegrating flagship, searching desperately for an exit. Alarms screamed. Walls collapsed. Vorax soldiers ran past them without even noticing, too panicked to fight. He found an escape pod and pushed Song Yi inside. She was still unconscious but breathing. He strapped her in and launched the pod just as the section of the ship behind them exploded. They fell toward Earth, the remains of the flagship burning in the sky above them. In Haven, the Resistance watched in stunned silence as the Vorax flagship broke apart. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Dr. Lisa Morgan looked at her instruments and whispered a single word: victory. The room erupted in cheers. People hugged each other, crying and laughing at the same time. After 2 months of fear and death, humanity had won. But the battle was not over yet. Thousands of Vorax soldiers remained on Earth, cut off from their command ships. The Resistance spent the next 3 weeks hunting them down. Without the Annihilator threat, without Thrax's leadership, the aliens were disorganized and vulnerable. One by one, the remaining Varax forces were destroyed or captured. Some tried to surrender, but after everything they had done, few humans were willing to show mercy. Others fled toward their ships, trying to escape Earth's atmosphere. Most did not make it. Commander Carter led the final assault on the last Varax stronghold in what used to be Berlin. It was a brutal fight that lasted 2 days. When it was over, the Varax invasion of Earth was finished. On a clear morning 3 months after the invasion began, Carter stood before a crowd of survivors in the ruins of Washington, D.C. Behind him, a massive memorial had been built, bearing the names of everyone who had died fighting for humanity's survival. Marcus Webb's name was at the top of the list. Carter spoke into a microphone. His voice broadcast to every corner of the globe. "We have won," he said. "But this victory came at a terrible cost. Millions of our brothers and sisters died. Our cities lie in ruins. Our world will never be the same." He paused, looking at the faces in the crowd. "But we survived." When faced with extinction, humanity did not surrender. We did not give up. We fought back with everything we had, and we won. His voice grew stronger. The universe now knows that Earth is not a planet of easy prey. We are a planet of warriors, a planet of survivors, a planet that will never kneel to any invader, no matter how powerful they seem. The crowd cheered, their voices rising into the sky. Kevin Park stood in the crowd, his arm around Song Yi. She had recovered from her wounds, though she would carry scars for the rest of her life. They both would. He thought about Marcus Webb, the hacker who had become a hero. He thought about Amy Richardson, the pilot who had given her life to give them a chance. He thought about Nathan Cole, who had died trying to save the world. They had not died in vain. 1 week later, Dr. Lisa Morgan received a transmission from deep space. It was a message from the galactic community. The same beings that Marcus had discovered disapproved of the Varax invasion. The message was simple. "People of Earth, we have witnessed your struggle and your victory. You have proven yourselves worthy of recognition. The Galactic Council extends an invitation to join our community as full members. Welcome to the stars." Lisa brought the message to Commander Carter. He read it 3 times before speaking. "Well," he said quietly, "it seems we have caught someone's attention." The future was uncertain. Rebuilding Earth would take decades. The scars of the invasion would never fully heal. And now they knew that the universe was full of other species, some friendly, some hostile. But humanity had proven something important. They were not weak. They were not helpless. When pushed to the edge of extinction, they had pushed back and won. On the day the galactic message was announced to the world, Kevin Park visited the memorial in Washington. He found Marcus Webb's name and placed his hand on the cold stone. "We did it," he whispered. "Because of you, we did it." He looked up at the stars, visible even in the daylight through Earth's clearing atmosphere. Somewhere out there, new adventures waited. New challenges. New enemies, perhaps. And new friends. Humanity was ready. The first chapter of Earth's story had been survival. The next chapter would be exploration. And it was just beginning.